Canada's economy is in trouble for many reasons, including the poor leadership of Justin Trudeau. But there's another reason behind the Great White North's economic problems: massive wildfires and environmental problems. Wildfire and climate-related costs are projected to soar to 25 billion Canadian dollars by 2025, halving economic growth. By mid-century, Canada is expected to lose 500,000 jobs, primarily due to wildfires and rising temperatures, leading to premature death. Living in regions affected by wildfires is an unfortunate reality for an increasing number of Canadians, from Quebec to Alberta and British Columbia. Yet even for those far from the flames, the repercussions are significant and escalating. The economic fallout from last summer's wildfires has already brought down numerous national economic indicators, reflecting widespread disruption across various sectors from coast to coast. The wildfires hampered overall economic activity, particularly in the second quarter of last year, as fires in crucial oil, mining, and forestry regions led to production shutdowns and interrupted the supply chain in many areas. All of this has a massive impact that has knock-on effects for years down the line and decreases economic confidence and investment. In this video, we're going to focus on the economic impact that environmental change has had on Canada, particularly last year's rampant wildfires and how it impacted GDP, as well as key industries and sectors of the economy. Before we cover the economic impact of environmental change, it's important to realize just how unprecedented and terrible the fires were last year in Canada from the environmental side of things. With an astounding 20 million hectares of Canadian land consumed by fire last year, the 2023 wildfire season was the most severe wildfire rampage ever documented, surpassing the previous record set in 1989, when 7.6 million hectares were scorched across the country. This not only brought down millions of hectares of trees and ecosystems, they also created a compounded effect of worse symptoms down the line. The ramifications of wildfires extend far beyond their immediate impact, potentially influencing future extreme weather events in a vicious cycle, as some experts suggest could occur as early as this spring. Uldis Salins, a forest hydrology professor at the University of Alberta, emphasizes the likelihood of heightened landscape disturbances leading to phenomena such as flooding following fires or fires after severe flooding, all of which is relatively uncharted territory after fires on this scale. The loss of tree cover due to wildfires results in a denser snowpack, as the foliage that once held back snow no longer exists, leading to increased snow accumulation on the ground. The absence of tree transpiration due to fire-induced tree death can result in saturated soils, earlier snowmelt, and altered runoff patterns. The consequences of wildfires extend to soil conditions, with severe fires interrupting the hydrological cycle. Because tree cover is gone and rainfall becomes erratic, and because roots are gone that usually filter and reduce water, the rainy season ends up turning into a flood. Such conditions elevate the risk of mudslides and flooding during wet seasons, necessitating vigilant monitoring during flood seasons. As communities grapple with the aftermath of wildfires, there is a growing imperative to enhance preparedness for wildfires' collateral effects. Suggestions include proactive management of fuel loads and forest conditions in forested regions, as well as the development of more sophisticated flood and drought prediction models that account for changing land covers and fire risks. Despite recognition of the need for improved preparedness and response measures, concrete strategies from policymakers remain pending. Emergency Preparedness Minister Harjit Sajjan acknowledged the necessity of addressing future extreme weather events, but stopped short of detailing specific plans, leaving uncertainties lingering regarding the nation's readiness to confront escalating environmental challenges. In light of the increasingly volatile climate landscape, there's a looming specter of unprecedented emergencies fueled by extremes of flood, drought, and wildfire, underscoring the imperative for comprehensive and proactive measures to mitigate their impact on communities and ecosystems. Then we come to the awful economic impact of these wildfires across Canada last year, especially in Alberta, but also everywhere else. Last year's unprecedented wildfire season underscores the broader toll on families, communities, and ecosystems, highlighting the inherent vulnerability of economic foundations to such environmental crises. While fires raged through Yellowknife, Kelowna, and across Quebec, And the east and west of Canada last year, it wasn't just limbs and branches crashing to the ground, it was also the economy. Statistics Canada noted these fire-related slowdowns in its spring GDP report, where goods output declined by 0.3% month over month and has continued to plummet since that time. With a wrench in production and transportation, exports plummeted primarily due to reduced shipping volumes of resource commodities affected by wildfire-related production cuts. Consumer confidence also took a large hit, especially in directly affected regions. The Conference Board of Canada reported a sharp decline in its monthly consumer confidence index in 2023, particularly in Alberta, where the fire's impact was most severe. This weakened sentiment and translated into reduced consumer spending in the following months, with wildfires persisting and intensifying the extent of destruction, surpassing initial estimates. The economic ramifications also impacted national economic activity such as raw material supplies, transportation, and exports. Some losses like tourism revenue and damaged crops are irreparable and simply represent a giant chunk taken out of the Canadian economy. The tourism industry took a hit right at the busiest time of year, coinciding with the critical summer season, even in areas far from the fires. Business plummeted in Tofino, British Columbia, for example, a popular destination for whale watching, when a massive forest fire cut off the town's only highway access. The wildfires also contributed to inflation, as damaged forests affect wood supplies and drive up lumber prices. The fires have disrupted oil and gas operations, slashed timber harvests, dented the tourism sector, and imposed immeasurable burdens on the national healthcare system. These losses epitomize the mounting pressure felt globally as nations grapple with successive disasters spurred by extreme weather events. The repercussions will only escalate as the climate continues to warm, and especially as policy for managing forest fires continues far behind where it should be. If the environmental concerns facing Canada aren't addressed, the nation is looking at a lot more lost revenue. What once seemed a distant worry has sharply come into focus in recent years as vast swaths of North America have been blanketed by smoke, neighborhoods swept away by floods, and power grids strained by heat waves. Despite attempts to model the impacts, such rapid escalation defies prediction. Last year's fires idled lumber mills and reduced timber availability, worsening Canada's housing shortage. Regardless of the severity of individual episodes, costs escalated as disasters approach critical infrastructure and population centers, as witnessed in recent years. While rural areas have borne the brunt of this year's fires, the long-term threat to industries like oil lies in declining fossil fuel demand. However, a hot summer ahead could further exacerbate the situation. The insurance industry, witnessing escalating damages, is on high alert. Before 2009, insured losses averaged around 450 million Canadian dollars annually. Large reinsurers withdrew from the Canadian market following crippling payouts, driving up prices for homeowners and businesses. Craig Stewart of the Insurance Bureau of Canada highlighted climate issues as a primary concern, advocating for a comprehensive adaptation strategy released in late June. The need for investments in mitigation is evident to leaders like Halifax Mayor Mike Savage, who sees firsthand the impact of wildfires and hurricanes on his city. He stresses the necessity of continued investment in resilience measures, recognizing the challenges ahead. Urgent attention must be given to adaptation and mitigation policies to mitigate the escalating costs of environmental change and forest fires. A growing body of research indicates that the macroeconomic impacts of wildfires are getting worse and likely to continue to increase. Unlike isolated shocks that disrupt growth sporadically, wildfires and their related side effects and risks like floods keep building off each other and blocking economic expansion unless proactive policy measures are implemented to address it. It's estimated that by 2025, Canada's GDP is expected to decrease by $25 billion due to climate change. This adds up to $630 per capita of lost national income, more than double the cost of the November 2021 floods in British Columbia and 12 times the total insured losses from weather-related disasters in Canada in 2021. By 2030, GDP is forecasted to be $35 billion lower than it would have been otherwise due to climate change, with estimates ranging from $80 to $103 billion by 2055. While governments may absorb some of the impacts through infrastructure rebuilding and healthcare spending, ultimately taxpayers bear the burden, with low-income households disproportionately affected. As for the cause of all these wildfires, there's no doubt that environmental pollution and shifts are partly to blame for what's happening with wildfires, but the Liberal government also bears some of the blame for not allocating sufficient resources to fire prevention and wildfire management and letting forests reach a highly flammable state without allowing the clearing out of fire-prone areas. Canada's usual opportunistic climate alarmists, including Prime Minister Trudeau, Environment Minister Guilbeault, and the far-left Elizabeth May, blame the flames on climate change and not their leadership in Canadian forest policy. And the only cure is to end fossil fuel use. But let's bring some facts to the hysteria. First, yes, the climate is indeed warming. According to the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or the IPCC, the global average atmospheric temperature is rising globally, and according to one analysis, twice as fast in Canada. Of course, how much of this warming is man-made is a different story. But is this recent atmospheric warming causing the increase in forest fires globally, and Canadian fires specifically? The IPCC, in its latest Omnibus Climate Report, only assigns medium confidence to the idea that climate change has actually caused increased fire weather in some regions on Earth. This, mind you, after desperately seeking to tie real-world events to increasing greenhouse gas concentrations for some 40 years now. In addition, many reports have shown that while fire activity is on the rise in some regions, we're still not seeing an overall increase when considering the total areas burned at the global level. As the Royal Society, an independent scientific academy in the United Kingdom, summarizes in a 2020 blog post, updating its 2016 research on global wildfire extent, fire activity is on the rise in some regions, but when considering the total area burned at the ground level, we're not seeing an overall increase. The 2016 report was more explicit, finding, instead, global area burned appears to have overall declined over past decades, and there is increasing evidence that there is less fire in the global landscape today than centuries ago. While the Royal Society acknowledges that climate change may be increasing risk, it also observes that there are many other human activities that may contribute to more or less fires and more or less areas consumed. But what about Canada per se? Is it clear that Canada's fire issues are climate-driven? Unless one believes that inverse correlation suggests causality, the answer is no. The truth is that Canada isn't putting nearly enough money to preventing wildfires. After they happen, the federal government shovels over some funding, but they aren't giving nearly as much as they give to prepare for floods and earthquakes. This makes no sense given how wildfires are increasing across the country. More specifically, the report finds that Canada has failed to fund the proactive management of forest fires sufficiently and is not set to do better moving forward. Wildfire management agencies in Canada are at a tipping point. Pre-suppression and suppression costs are increasing, but program budgets are not. But clearly, a lack of fire suppression is also a problem. Wildfire suppression contributes to a wildfire problem, but paradoxically, it is wildfire use that will help to solve this problem. The wildfire management toolbox must include wildfire use to manage wildfires at the landscape scale business, because it is not feasible to effectively use prescribed burns and/or fuel management treatments alone to restore expansive wildfire-dependent ecosystems. That's a somewhat academic, long-winded way of saying you need to fight fire with fire, but the point is valid nonetheless. Canada is having a hell of a fire season, there's no disputing that, and it's producing hellish landscapes across Canada and North America. What it is not, however, is a call to more of the same old climate action, but rather a call for more sane, real-world, real-time management of fire risk in Canada's forests, a practice that Canadian governments have failed at for decades. One can only hope that this fire season will light a fire under Canada's fire-foolish policymakers and finally motivate them to take the rational course, fighting fire risk with fire use, rather than pointing to the climate sky gods and calling for appeasement measures that will not affect Canada's risk of forest fires. If you like this video and want to learn more about what's really going on in Canada, check out this video here. And if this video brought value to you today, please consider liking, subscribing, and sharing the video. Thanks for watching.